class. I hope we're having a great day. So we'll just start right away and I'll show my SharePoint screen. Today we are going to be creating an approval flow. So I'll start by creating some lists on SharePoint. I'll just explain as we go. So first of all, we'll create a list. So to create a list, this is my SharePoint page. To get to the SharePoint page, you just come to office.com, you sign in. Once you sign in, you get this page. Then you come here, you'd see the icon for SharePoint. You just click on the icon for SharePoint, then it takes you into SharePoint. So, okay, let me click it again just so you see how it works. Please, if at any time you have a question, just let me know. So for now, I have this just one site, or at least frequent site. So I'll just go into this site, SharePoint site. Then inside here, I can create SharePoint lists. So these are the different things I can create. I can create a SharePoint list, document library, page, space, news post, news link, plan, app. So for today, we are going to be making use of a SharePoint list. So I'll just click on list. Okay, so I would say blank list because I just want to create a blank list. I'm not creating it from an Excel file or an existing list. So I'll name my list travel because it's a travel approval flow we're actually trying to create here. So I'll name my list travel underscore. I'll just put a name to it. Okay. Description, I'll just leave that blank. You can add the description if you like. And I would say create. So anytime you create a SharePoint list, by default, would have the title column. This is a default column. Then you can add other types of columns or other columns that you'd like your SharePoint list to have. So in this case, I'm going to add column, and in the type of column is currency because I want to put in an amount so it can automatically just change it depending on the currency that I pick. So this this column is going to be named amount. I'll leave the description blank. So you can see here, you still have the option of changing the type of field or the type of column that you're creating, but I want it as currency, so I'll just leave it at that. So number of places, I don't want it to have decimal places. Currency format, here you can choose what currency you want. So I am in Nigeria, and so I'll just pick Nigeria with the currency format. Then default value, I don't want a default value, so I'm just going to leave it blank, and then I'll click on save. Okay, so you can see amount was created. So it successfully created a column for me. So now I'm going to create another column, and this one is going to be a single line of text. And I'm going to call this one status. Okay, and I'll save. I'm not going to change any other thing. I'll just say save right away. So now we'll go into creating the Power Automate flow. So to create Power Automate flow or to navigate to the flow page, there are two ways you can go about it. You can actually, from the office.com, you can come here. Once you see the flow icon, once you hover on it, it's going to show Power Automate. So you can just click here and it takes you to the Power Automate page. Or you can open a new tab and say flow.microsoft.com. and it will take you to the flow page as well. It's the same thing. So I'll just go ahead and close one. I'll just go ahead and close this one and come in here. Okay. So I'd have to sign out of this because I'm in here with the wrong account. So I'll just say sign out. Okay, so I'll sign in again and now choose the account I actually want to sign in with. So I'll just go in with this one, enter my password. Okay. Okay, so I'll just change my location. Oh, no. Okay, and I'll say get started. Okay, so this is the flow page. So I'll come to create. And so what we want to create is an automated cloud flow. So I'm just going to click on automated cloud flow. So we also have templates. So sometimes we have like a skeletal framework of different flows. So for instance, you want to build a flow. It's possible that there already is a template for it. So you can just come in, click on the template and edit it to suit you. So there are a lot, this is just topics. We have different topics here. So there are a lot and a lot and a lot of templates that you can easily choose from. But for today, we just want to create a new flow. And so I'll click on automated cloud flow because we are trying to create an automated flow. So we also have the instance cloud flow, we have the scheduled cloud flow, we have desktop flow and the business process flow. So I'll just try to briefly explain what each of these does. So the automated cloud flow is a flow that is triggered by an event. So there has to be something that has happened for this kind of flow to get triggered. So for instance, you can have a flow that is triggered when an email is received, for instance, or when a record is created, or when a record is deleted, or when a record is modified in CDS. For instance, we can have a flow that is going to be triggered by an event. That's how automated cloud flow works. For instant cloud flow, you have to literally click a button that is going to start, that is going to make the flow to start running. For scheduled, on the other hand, is basically I want a flow that runs, for instance, 8 a.m. every day. Scheduled cloud flow is the kind of flow to use. Desktop flow, on the other hand, is it helps you automate processes on your desktop environment. So beyond the way we have this with a few cards, it is much more than that. This one you have to install, you actually have to install it on your computer, and then it can perform many more tasks than the automated instant and scheduled flow can do. Then business process flow is a flow that goes like step by step. It runs a set of processes. After that step is completed, it goes to the next step, runs another series of processes. Basically, business processes. That's how the business process flow works. So for today, we just need to create an automated cloud flow. So I'll just click on that. Now we'll name our flow. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say skip. So it just takes us directly into the flow. And then I can rename it here by clicking on this. I want my flow to be expense approval. And our trigger action is when an item is created. Now it's going to be a SharePoint card we are using. So we are using the SharePoint. So I'm going to click on SharePoint here. So now I want my trigger. You can see triggers and actions. So triggers is like, what event do you want this flow to be triggered on? That's basically what triggers are. So there are a lot of different triggers. So the one we're using in this case is when an item is created. So basically, okay, it's just creating a connection for me. Yep, so that is done. So what I'll do is click on this drop down. You can see my site here. I'll click on that. Then my SharePoint list. You can see the list I created earlier is appearing here. So I'll just click on it to select that. So basically what I'm trying to say is that when I create, yeah, this is my list. So whenever I create an item in this SharePoint list, I want my flow to get triggered and to run all the actions I'm going to insert in my flow. So that's basically what I'm saying by creating this flow. That's what I want this flow to do. So now this is called the trigger card. We've added the trigger card. So now we're going to add other cards, the action cards. So now we'll add a new action or new step. So you click on, we'll just search for approval. So this is approvals. You click on this one. So we want to use, so this is create an approval. This is start and wait for an approval. This is wait for an approval. So there are two options. It's either you use create an approval, you can add cards in between and then come and say wait for an approval, or you just use one card, which is start and wait for an approval. So I'll use this one instead. Okay, so the approval type. So in this case, the approval type I want is start and is first to respond rather. So now let me try to explain what each of these is. So for instance, I have a situation where I'm sending an approval that I need 3 of my superiors or 3 people to approve before I can go to the next step. In this case, if I choose this, everybody has to approve before this flow can actually see it as approved and then move to the next step. If I say first to respond, it means I just need one person to approve. Even if the approval is sent to 5 people, I just need one person to approve, and then the approval stage is completed, or one person to reject, and then that approval stage is completed, and then it moves to the next action. And then if I say wait for all responses, it means that all 5 people have to either approve or reject before it goes to the next stage. Then custom responses, you can actually add your own custom response to it. So I'm going to go with first to respond in this case. So now I'll just add the title as please approve the following expense. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just assign it to myself. Okay, so I'll just assign it to myself so it's easy for me to demonstrate how this works. So for the details, I would say the following expense Then so what I'll do is I'll just put the title here. So this is a dynamic content. So what this is going to do is when anybody, okay, let me just complete this. Sorry, I don't mean to put that status here. I need to enter the amount. Okay, I can just search as been submitted by. So here I'll use the created by. I'll just use the name. Okay, so now let me try to explain this a little bit. So now, when you come to your SharePoint list, here you can see title, amount, status. So actually, title is not the only automatically created column. There are some columns that are just there by default, but this is the only one that is displayed. So you can actually change the settings. Sorry. Okay, so you can click on column settings and say show hide columns. So this would give you a list of all the available columns that you actually have. What happened? Yeah, it will give you the list of all the available columns you have on this SharePoint list. So it's up to you to actually tick the ones you want to appear here. So the ones ticked are the only ones that are going to appear here. So all these type of columns like ID, content type, modified, created. Of course, you didn't create this. It gets created automatically when you create a SharePoint list. So if, for instance, because I'm using the created by, I just want to add created by, created and modified. And yeah, let me just add modified by. I just want to add this few. I don't want these other ones to be showing on my SharePoint list. So once I'm done, I say apply and boom, you can see I now have modified, created, created by, modified by. Yep. So basically, so now what is a dynamic content? I'm already telling my flow what to do. Basically, dynamic content is when I create an item now, it's going to have a title, it's going to have the amount. So the flow here for each item that is being created, when it's sending this approval, it has details of it has the details you have in this SharePoint list. So it will just pick the title, the amount, the created by, display name, which is what these dynamic content are. They are just details of the content you have in your SharePoint list, basically. So, so now I've added the title, amount, created by. Okay. So what's the next thing we want to do? So they said item link. So we can actually put a link to the item. This is going to be a link that will take you directly to the item in this SharePoint list. So I just want to search here. I'll just search for link and you can see link to item. So I'll just click this so that when it's sending an approval to the person or approval request to the person, it just puts the link there. So it's easy for them to navigate to the item you want them to approve. That's basically why we are doing this. So for the description, I just want to leave that blank. So now I'll add a new step. So, so far, are there any questions? Hello, Lavender. Do you have any questions
Yes,
so
I'm
far?
here. Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
For the custom response,
Yeah,
what does that mean? I didn't understand what a custom response is.
that's in here, right?
Yeah, yeah,
These custom responses. Okay, let me just
yeah.
quickly show you how that works. So the next thing, okay, just ignore this last step. I would explain. So I'll just add an action, just like we did for this, and search for approval. I just want to demonstrate what the custom response means. I'll just pick the same card, but this time around, I'm going to say custom responses, right?
Yes,
Okay, yes. So what custom responses is basically, the other one is already programmed for you. There are specific options that you're going to have in here. It's going to give you approve, I think approve, reject. But this one, um, you can actually state the option. So for instance, I can say yes, right? And say no. Do you get? In this
yes,
case,
yes, that's
it
clear.
doesn't give you the option of approve in this case, it automatically gives you the option of approve or reject. In this other case, you're the one that is going to tell it what options do you want to give to the person that is approving. Do you want it to be approve or reject? Do you want it to be yes or no? Do you want it to, you can customize the approval response basically, or the approval, yeah, the response options. Do you want the approval to say yes or no? That's the basic difference between this one and this one. So in this one is approve, reject. In this one, you're the one that is going to decide what you want the response to be. Do you understand now?
Yes, that's very clear.
All right, thank you so much. So I'll just remove this card because we don't need it. So I'll just say delete because we don't need this one. Yep. So this is the one we're making use of. So the next step is going to be to add a condition. So now the reason why we're adding a condition is we want to be able to tell Flow that, oh, if the person approves, do this. If the person doesn't approve, do this other thing. So that's exactly why we're adding a condition. So in here, it will ask you to choose the value, right? So now what we want to, you see this outcome. That is what, so this is the outcome of the approval. If the outcome was approved or rejected, basically, is the outcome. If the person who was supposed to approve this approved it or rejected, whatever outcome it is, that's what we are trying to check using this condition. So what we are going to do is would say outcome. So now if the outcome is approved, we have approved or rejected, right? So if the outcome is approved, what do we want to do? We probably want to, it depends on what we want. We probably want to update the item in SharePoint to say, oh, so the status of our item or of our request is now approved. Or we want to do that and also send the email to the person who submitted the request to say, hey, your request has now been approved. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to update the item. So to do that, I'll also search for SharePoint because we have to use SharePoint card. So what we are going to do now is to update an item. So instead of scrolling the way I'm doing right now, you can just search here. Since you know that you want to update, you can just type update and you see the different options. So now we're dealing with an item, we're not dealing with a file. So we just do update item. Okay. So as we did before, we'll just select the address, which is the second one. We'll select the SharePoint list, which is travel underscore name. And then the ID. The ID now is, we can just get it from here. The title, we can get it from dynamic content title. The amount. So now these values that are being collected here. So now this ID is the one that is going to determine that, oh, if I have 1,000 items in my SharePoint list, for instance, the ID is unique. It's a unique identifier that identifies each item in my SharePoint list. Just the same way we have ID cards that helps identify a person. That's the same way this ID helps identify each item in our SharePoint list. So no two items are going to have the same ID in the SharePoint list. So this ID is what Flow uses to identify that, oh, okay, this is the exact item that you want to update in your SharePoint list. So now this title, this amount, so is it depends on what we want to change. So basically what we want to change is the status. We want to change the status to say it is approved or rejected. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this same outcome. We can either put this outcome here, or we can manually come and say approved in here. The amount, we are not changing the amount. That's the reason why I'm leaving it blank. You can as well just come in here and pick the dynamic content amount and place it here, which means we are not changing. The only thing that we want to change is this status, and we want to change it to approved because this parts of the condition. So if the outcome is approved, we want to run this part of the flow. So this is the reason why this is going to be approved. So what I can do is, once I'm done, once I'm done doing this, so this is just to update this item. So I also want to add another one at this end to also update the item. So this is if no. That means if the outcome is the outcome equal to approved? If it's no, what do? We want to do whatever is here. So if it's not approved, it's most likely rejected. So if it's not approved, then it's rejected. We also want to update the SharePoint list to say, oh, this item has been rejected. So what we are going to do is, instead of going through the process of adding another card, I'll just click on these three dots, the ellipses. So I'm just going to say copy to my clipboard. So it's going to copy everything I have, this update item, to my clipboard. So when I do that, I'll just come here. Let me close this just so I show it properly. I'll just add an action. Then instead of going to search for SharePoint, I'll just come to my clipboard and I will see that item I copied. So I'll just click on it and it's pasted. So now it's going to come as update item 2, obviously, because this one is already update item. So that's perfectly normal. So what I can do is I can rename this. I can just rename it to say update item rejected, just so it's explanatory. And I'll rename this other one and say update item approved. So in this case, I don't want to say approved. I want to say rejected because it's in the case where the approval was rejected. The request was rejected, rather. Okay. So before we go forward, I just want to save my flow. So okay, so yeah, it's saved and it says my flow is ready to go and I can test it. But before we go ahead to test the flow, as I said, what I'd like us to do now is to add another step inside each of these boxes to say to send an email to the person who created the request. So what I want to do is send an email. Send an email. Okay. So in this place, because for some reason in an organization, you probably can have everybody raising their request here. So we want to dynamically be able to pick the person who creates an item. So what I'll do because of that is instead of typing a specific email address here, we want to make use of a dynamic content and go to our SharePoint of when an item is created and pick the created by email, which is the email address of the person who created the request on our SharePoint list. So I'll just pick that one. And the subject would say expense. Please hold on. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So sorry. I'm not sure what happened.
It's
Um,
okay.
okay. I'll just share my screen again. Please let me know the last thing you heard before I went off the call.
You are adding the email.
Oh, okay, okay. That
Yeah,
was
the
last.
details for the email.
All right, all right. Thank you so much. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just go back to the flow screen. Okay, yes. So right here. So we've added the created by email. So now we just want to say expense approved. And what's in the body? We can just say something like your expense. And I'd like to put the title of the expense. Okay, so I don't want to use that from the update item. I want to use that from when an item is created here, title. So I'll put your expense that is going to show. So in the email it's going to send, it's going to actually show the title of the expense. So your expense that has been approved by, I'm just going to put the person who approves the, so in this one you have to look under this approvals part. So it's supposed to be the response. Just hold on, please. So now if I click on this, trying to, this is just the name. Okay, so ordinarily this is what I'd like to put, but as you can see, because it has responses, it's added this in an apply to each, and I definitely don't want this to be in an apply to each, so I'd remove that and drag this out and delete this apply to each. Say okay. So what I'll do instead is to come to this part and say expression. So I'll just type it out. Body, uh, single quotes, and in here I'll put start and wait for approval. Start underscore and underscore wait. Basically anywhere there's a space, I'll put an underscore. So the reason why I'm doing this is basically because I don't want this to loop through and go into an apply to each. That's why I'm having it this way. Start and wait for an approval.
What will the apply to each do?
Okay, so an apply to each is basically another type of control. So for instance, okay, I'll answer that. Let me just quickly finish typing this so I can say okay, because if I add another step here, it might cancel this. So I'll answer that shortly. Let me just finish
Okay.
typing this one. Yes. So after this, okay. This is supposed to be single quotes. And display name. Okay, so basically, basically this is the same um this is the same thing as adding it in here as a dynamic content. It's more like using a formula to create your own dynamic content. That's basically what this is. So I would say okay, then I'll go ahead to explain what an apply to each is. So this is what an apply to each does. Okay, so it's a control. So under control actions, you'd see apply to each. So I can decide to put So let me try to explain what an apply to each is. So for instance, you see this SharePoint list that we have here. So for instance, I'm trying to look through, just see a scenario where I'm trying to look through all the values. So for instance, I have 20 items or 100 items in my SharePoint list, right? And I want to iterate through all the items I have in my SharePoint list and perform an action based on every item I have on my SharePoint list. So for instance, let's say I'm trying to do some form of audit, and instead of coming to my SharePoint list, I want to create a process such that Flow is going to go through my SharePoint list for me and then pick through all the items I have here and provide me some details like the title, amount, status. So I'll just go to the flow. So for instance, let me remove this outcome here. So I want to iterate through the IDs of every item there. And then maybe I want to send an email. Uh, Let me use my email here. So now, so for instance, I want to iterate through every single item there, and I just want the title, the status, and the amount. I'll just search for it. Right? And I want to send an email. So this is going to do is that what is going to happen when this flow is running this stage, I probably might leave this apply to each. It's not part of the flow we are building today, but I probably might leave it here just to show you how the apply to each works. So what's going to happen eventually is when the flow runs, once it gets to an apply to each, it picks the first ID you have in that list. It runs whatever you have in the body. It doesn't finish this, it goes to the next ID, it does the same thing, goes to the next item, does the same thing, goes to the, so basically whatever you have inside the body of your apply to each, you're basically saying pick each item on my, because I have used the ID here of a SharePoint list, it's more like saying go to this SharePoint list, pick all the items one by one, and then apply every single step that I have added in the body to that item. Is it clear?
Yes. Does that mean that if I add a record on that SharePoint list, it will go
Yeah.
through the whole thing again? It will apply to each
Uh,
again, or
Yes.
no?
So now the
Oh,
reason why it's going to go through it again is because, to start with, our trigger item is saying when a new item or when an item is created. So each time an item is created on this SharePoint list, this flow is going to get triggered. So it's now going to run through all of these steps. So as at the time it's running this apply to each, if you have 50 items in your SharePoint list as at that time, it's going to iterate through all 50 items. So that way you're going to see something like one one of 50, for instance. If you have 50 items, I'll show you an example shortly. Before the end of the class, I'll make sure I show you an example of how this apply to each runs.
okay.
All right. So I'll just leave this here, or what I'll do is I'll drag it up. Uh, I'll just drag it out here. Oh, okay. Sorry. So I'll take my clipboard and I'll paste it here. Uh, okay. I'm pasting it at the end because I just want us to finish. I want it to run all the important steps before it gets there. So I'll just remove it from inside here. It's basically the same thing. So I'll just delete it from here and say okay. So okay, so the last time we added this, right? So what I'll do is I just copy this to my clipboard as usual. Uh, I'll just go to my clipboard and paste it from my clipboard. So the same way I renamed that one, I'll rename this one as well. I'll say rename rejected and rename approved. So in this one now, I'd have to edit it because it was not approved, it was rejected. I'll put rejected. So yet I'll put rejected. Okay. So I'll save for now. So now we would like to test this flow. So for now we are done here. So to test this flow, there are two ways to do it. So you can come here and say you want to test manually. That would mean you have to go to the list. So I can say manually and say test. So now, if I want to see this flow work, I have to go and create an item in this SharePoint list. If not, this will never run because it's an automated flow. And as I said earlier, for automated flows, you need to actually perform an action to make the flow to start running. And in this case, the action to perform is to create a new item here. So what we'll do is create a new item. So what's my title? I just say vacation and then amount. Amount, I'll just put in 5. And status, I'll leave that blank and I'll say save. So you can see it shows 250,000 naira. So the truth is, when you initially create an item, your created and modified are going to be the same thing. So your modified is basically the time when this item was last modified. Created is the time of creation. Created by is the person that created it. Modified by is the person that modified it. So at the creation of an item, this created and modified are going to be the same thing. So now I can come to my run. You can see that my flow has started running. So this shows that it got triggered. Fine. So you can see that on this point, you have a yellow timer or a yellow signal at this end, which means it's still running this part. So definitely what approvals do is that it sent an approval and I put myself. I'd have to go to my email rather to go and check the approval and then approve it. So You can see in here it says please approve the following. You can see I already got the approval message. Okay, so it says please approve the following expense. The following expense vacation, which is the title. You know, when I was creating the flow, I just used dynamic content of title, amount, and who submitted it. So you can see it's appearing all fine now. And so I can come, this is the link to the item. So for instance, I am the manager and I see this and I'm like, I want to check it out myself. I don't want to just go by the details provided here. I want to actually see it inside the SharePoint list myself. I can just click on this link and it's going to take me directly to that SharePoint list to view that item, which is what it's doing right now. Yeah. So you see, it just takes me into that SharePoint item to just see more details about the item. But this doesn't create a place, it's just for you to view the item, not to approve. So to approve or to reject, what I can do, if I want to approve, I'll say approve. If I want to enter additional comment, I can just say, yeah, this has been approved. I'll say submit. So yeah, it's been approved and that is it. So now I'll go back to the flow and you will see that because I approved it, this part, this part has been approved. So now let's look at the condition. So the condition says true because we're checking is the outcome approve or reject. And because it was approved, it's going to be true. So it's going to come in here and update. This step is basically going to update the SharePoint list with these values. This is long. Let me just minimize. While this one is going to send an email to the person who sent a request to say, hey, your expense vacation has been approved. So basically, if I check my email now, I should see another email saying, sorry, I need to refresh. In the meantime, let's check this SharePoint list. So we want to check the status. So you can see that the status has been approved. That's shown approved, which means the flow has successfully updated to show approved. So you can also see that it has sent me the email saying your expense vacation, this is the title of the expense, has been approved by the person who is supposed to approve. So our flow worked fine, except for the apply to each step I was trying to use to show to demo. And the reason is hold on. This is not particularly a very good. Okay, so I'll just remove this and save it again. The apply to each year is not a, okay, let me use something else. That was not a very good, a very good good example of or scenario to use apply to each, but let me do something else. Get items. Okay. I'll still use the send an email scenario. Send an email. Okay, I'll just send the email to myself so I don't clog any other person's email box. I can delete this later. Tests. In here, I want the title. You can see it automatically goes into the apply to each itself because it's the perfect scenario to demo the apply to each status. What happened here? Just hold on. I'll save and then I'll edit it again. Okay. So title. Something is not quite right. Okay. So what I'll do is this. So initially I said manually. We manually tested the flow. So this case, I want to use automatically with a recently used trigger, and it's the one of a few minutes ago. And I'll say test. So now you can see I just received an email, which is the approval request that is going to say, please approve. And this time around, I'll reject and say rejected and submit. Okay. So go back to the flow. The flow ran successfully. The reason it failed before was exactly, so this is what I wanted to show. The reason it failed before was because the apply to each scenario I added was not, there was something wrong about it. So I've added a better one. So now you can see that in an apply to each, it says one of one. So the reason it is saying one of one is because we have only one item in our SharePoint list. So now I'll just create like two more just to show that again. In the meantime, please, do we have any questions? Hello? Is there anybody there?
Yeah, no question from me.
Okay, okay. You can see this thing has updated. It is now rejected because I used that same scenario. So now I've gotten a couple of emails saying come and approve or come and reject. See, I got the email of expense rejected. So for the first one, I'll just approve. You don't have to put a comment. I'll leave it blank and just submit. Aha. So I can come back here. You can see this one is succeeded. So, okay. So when an item is created, start and wait for an approval. It sends the approval, I already approved, right? So because I approved, it shows true. So you can see that when it's true, it doesn't run both ends. It can only run the yes or the no part. So because it's running the yes part, because this is true, the no part will just be grayed out like this. It's not going to run the no part. This was just to demonstrate the apply to each. So you can see apply to each. So because we have 3 items in our list now, it is showing one of 3. So if you go to the next, it's for the next item, and this for the third item on our list. So do you also understand the concept of apply to each now?
Yes, that is very clear.
All right, thank you so much. So I think we've come to the end of our class for today. Do we have any other questions?
No, but I have a clarification.
All
For
right,
the
please.
for the options for the start and wait for approval, there was
Yeah.
the approve or reject. Everyone must approve.
Yes.
When they say everyone must approve, it doesn't necessarily mean approve. It means that everyone who is in
Must.
the, if someone rejects it and the other people approve it, as long as everyone has given a response, or does it
Yeah.
mean that all of them have to be the approved option?
Okay, that's for this one, right?
Yeah, the first one.
Everyone must approve. Yeah. So it's not necessarily approve. Everybody has to give a response in order to go ahead. But the clause to this is for it to be approved, everyone has to approve. So if you have 4 people that are supposed to answer or are supposed to give if you have 4 people that are supposed to give a response to this approval, for instance, in the assigned to, I assigned it to 4 people, you must have all 4 people either approve or reject. So for instance, if I for it to be approved, when is everyone must approve? For it to be approved, all 4 of those people must approve it for it to be approved. Do you understand?
Yes, and the last question. Now that you've said assign the people who are assigned to, the people who
Yeah.
are assigned to are the people that we're talking about who are supposed to approve or reject a record.
Yes, 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 exactly.
Okay,
So
okay.
in here, I have
Mhm.
just one name now, for instance. So for instance, here I can have like 5 email addresses. So this approval will be sent to all 5 or 10 people, as many people as I put in the assigned to. I can add multiple people. That's exactly how it works.
Okay, that's clear, very clear.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So I think would end this here. Okay. All right. Thank you so
Okay,
much for attending to this class and see you next week.
okay, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.